As teachers, we do everything we can to help our students be successful in the classroom. Now, 3 things that we do and 3 terms that we use often as educators are these: differentiation, accommodation, and modification. So it's important that we understand how these can be utilized to help our students, but also understand the similarities and differences between these terms. So let's start with this: differentiated instruction or differentiation. This is the broad term, the overarching term that encompasses all of the small adjustments or tailored instruction or tailored assessment that we provide to individual students or groups of students that need something just a little different. For example, we might, for an individual student or groups of students, tailor our instruction so students can gain access to the content or to the process of learning. Or we might even change the learning environment just a little bit, or give them an opportunity to demonstrate their understanding in a way that's slightly different from the rest of the class. When we make these small adjustments for our students, we call this differentiated instruction.
We use differentiation all across the curriculum here at Highlander, and especially in the first grade. Although the content is the same, having the stations really allows me to tailor my lessons to each individual group of learners. So how the differentiation looks in my classroom, we start off with a whole group lesson.
So let's get our reading glasses on. Let's get the letter part of our brains activated.
This section of our curriculum, we have been looking at nonfiction texts. When we're looking at our book today, we're going to be thinking about where we can get information. And then in the phonics realm, we focused on contractions.
We're taking 2 words, and what are we sticking them together with?
Apostrophe.
Yes, Karen. Good
and then we break off into our small groups. So our yellow group is still learning how to do a lot of our literacy things. The green group is doing pretty well, but has a few things to work on still. And our blue group is hitting all the first grade standards and needs to be stretched. So our differentiation kind of takes 2 forms. The first is by student grouping, and the second is by modality of learning. We have 20 minutes per station, and there are 3 of the stations. The students will rotate through all 3 stations each day.
We had a contrasting game. It's fun because it's all mixed up and you had to find the right pieces. And then after we do that, we do rainbow writing.
That's another way that we differentiate. If students are able to get through more work, then they have some freedom of choice.
Clean it up, switch it up.
The last station, we're talking to each other and learning from each other. So that's more of the social interaction type of modality.
I like the teacher station the most because we get to be with Miss Gallagher and we get to learn cool stuff.
So take a look at the illustrations on this page, right?
The content is the same, but it can be differentiated in a number of ways. My blue group, for example, they know what text is. They know what illustrations are. And so for them, I create a Venn diagram.
You need to make one circle like this, and then you make another circle overlapping that.
Oh.
For the yellow or the green group, I'm just leaving the Venn diagram out of it. We're still doing essentially the same thing, but just that piece that might be confusing to some of those students, I just leave that out for a later time. They'll get to it.
So these formatives are a way of assessing everything that you have learned about prime and composite numbers.
We wanted to give students an opportunity to be re-taught skills that they did not learn. So what we did is we made sure that we had a time in the day where if students did not master the skill that was previously taught, we gave them time to master that.
If you're going to work independently to catch up, you'll actually turn the tables toward that wall. If you're going to collaborate, you're going to be at this table or you're going to be at this table. All right, go.
By differentiating in a space that's small or where you have a lot of students, we are able to set students up with the learning situations in which they can learn best.
If you guys want to work independently, what is going to be the best place and the best people to be next to you to work independently. Those who want the mini lesson are going to come to this table.
We provide a lot of flexibility for learning environments, whether it's flexibility in terms of the physical space, flexibility in terms of the different choices that students have. You see students seated toward the back of the room. Those students are working independently. The students who are at the tables had chosen to collaborate, which is something they thought through and made part of their goal setting. And then you have the group of students that chose one of the 2 mini lessons, and that takes place in the center of the classroom.
Is it better to have more body paragraphs or conclusion?
Sometimes a student will write a better thesis in the conclusion than they do at the opening because they've had a chance.
We wanted to collaborate because we've been helping each other on the steps that we have to do, and especially since they're so long, we kind of thought, oh, let's just work together. And also, I think if we were to be at other tables, we'd probably be more distracted.
You may walk by one room and see work time and the teacher floating around and giving one-on-one support to kids. Or you might see the teacher in the middle of a small group giving a quick mini lesson on something, then moving right on to the next group of students. Or you might see kids in a circle engaging in a Socratic seminar and having a dialogue about an issue that is tied to their class content.
Other students are in the process of gathering information for the experimental design project. So they were seen in the outside facing outwards so that I could see their screens and help them work through any distractions they might have. It's hard sometimes to stay focused, especially as freshmen.
Now, when we're talking about students who have an IEP, students that are on a 504 plan, so think of our students with special needs or other students that have documentation that requires us as teachers to provide very specific changes or adjustments to how we deliver instruction or how our students demonstrate understanding. This is when we start to use these terms, accommodation and modification. So again, these small changes or adjustments that we make to the content, process, to the learning environment, or how they demonstrate it. When we're talking about students who have an IEP or a 504, we use the term accommodation. And we do this because it encourages us as teachers to make sure that we're providing what legally needs to be provided based on what is on a document that has been agreed upon by the teacher, the parents, and all other team members involved. Now, if we don't make any large sweeping changes, if we're just making small adjustments about how students go about it or how we provide instruction, we call that an accommodation. We only use the term modification really to describe large changes in what students are working towards, say a learning goal. For example, let's say that the majority of the students in the classroom are working on a 4th grade learning goal geared towards the standards in mathematics at a 4th grade level. But I have a student who is working closer at a 1st to maybe a 2nd grade mathematical goal. If this student is working towards a completely different learning goal than his or her peers, we call that a modification, a larger change to not only how students are learning, but what they are learning about and working towards.
Accommodations change how a student accesses information, participates in school activities, or demonstrates their learning. They do not change the curriculum. Modifications, however, change what is being taught or what a student is expected to learn and demonstrate.
I only need you to do the circled problems for me.
Accommodations can be made by adjusting the amount of work a student must complete, allowing extra time.
Just go ahead and turn your paper in. Okay, you can go ahead and keep working. You've got about 5 more minutes.
Adapting assignments.
Alex, I have your shapes here. Good.
Providing extra assistance, or changing the physical setting.
Let's do one more page today.
There is no one set list. Because each child is unique, the IEP team must identify specific strategies to help your child succeed. For example, presenting a few math problems at a time may help a student who is easily overwhelmed. Another student might benefit from short breaks, or being allowed to finish an assignment at home. A student who has difficulty writing may be allowed the use of a computer, while students with a print disability may benefit from having text read aloud.
They went downtown.
A child can be given an appropriate role when working in small groups,
Where am I?
or be allowed to participate in an activity in a different way.
Beware of what? Excuse me?
Being seated near the teacher helps some students stay focused,
So we'll go ahead and discuss these in a minute.
and assistive technology can support a wide range of needs.
And if you need me, you can raise your hand and I'll come and help you. All right?
In addition to accommodations, it is sometimes necessary to modify the curriculum. For example, when the class is learning how to tell time, one child might be expected to identify only the hours. While the class is working on vocabulary and spelling, another child may work from a shorter list or focus exclusively on the meaning of key words.
Insects with 8 legs.
So again, differentiated instruction is the overall, overarching approach that we use to tailor our instruction for all of our students. Those who are covered with an IEP or a 504 plan, or who are not, anytime we tailor or make adjustments. But again, when we talk about students who have an IEP or a 504 plan, we start to use these terms accommodation and modification. Accommodation for different ways that we tailor their instruction and assessment, and modification for when they're actually working towards a different learning goal that's different from their peers. So if we look at all these terms stacked up one on top of another, this is what we see. We see differentiation is tailoring instruction and or assessment to meet individual needs. This is going to focus on how we teach our students as well as how they demonstrate understanding. For example, we might have a social studies teacher who wants her students to understand the impact of Lewis and Clark's expedition on shaping America. So she might present it in different ways, maybe for the whole class and then for a particular group that needs a little bit of added instruction. Then she might also provide different opportunities for students to demonstrate understanding in varied ways. Now, if we're talking about a student who is covered with an IEP or a 504, then we're going to start using the terminology accommodation. We might be providing very specific changes that don't fundamentally alter what they're working towards, but it does provide them access to the curriculum because they need this as well as it's documented that we need to provide this. For example, we might provide a student with a sign language or interpreter. We might allow him or her to provide oral responses instead of a written response. And why would we do this? Well, because it allows our students access to the curriculum, helps us to gauge to what degree they understand or can perform the process that we're working on, but also because it's required or mandated by an individualized education plan or a 504 plan. Now, when we're having our students actually working towards different things than their peers, when we're making fundamental changes in the curriculum, okay, this is when we're talking about modification. So again, if that 4th grade student is actually working on a 2nd grade learning goal instead of a 4th grade, if they're working on something fundamentally different than their peers, that's when we call it a modification.